The radical left is a metaphor, it's a symbol, it's an articulation. They don't exist, their numbers are too small. I'm on college campuses, I don't see much of them coming.
It seems that a lot of the argument coming from many on the left these days is the suggestion that people who hold radical left views just don't exist in large enough numbers in order to affect real change. Whether it's Michael Dyson in the recent Monk debate, or others, including the YouTuber Dusty.
Even though the right took over all three branches of government, even though they own most state legislatures, even though they own most state governorships, even though the right pretty much runs fucking everything, it didn't matter. The narrative shifted. A few far left idiots stepped up and gave them exactly what they wanted, and then presented them to their audience as though they represented the mainstream left, when they in no way did.
Or the driving force behind the Current Affairs online magazine. The claim seems to be that since Republicans are in government in the United States, the idea that the radical left has influence is ridiculous, or that you hear from people such as Jordan Peterson, but never hear from the individuals that represent the radical left. Since so few voices actually claim to represent that radical left, they must not exist, or must only exist in small numbers, surely nowhere near a majority. The argument then would appear to be that since we are in a democracy, we cannot be influenced by a small minority. The time to worry about the radical left would not be until such time as they become closer to becoming a majority. Now, in my upcoming video, I will explore how pervasive and deeply ingrained much of the radical left ideology is throughout the West already, and honestly, I believe this is obvious to anyone with any objectivity at all. For today, however, I will try to show that within a large population, small segments can have tremendous impacts on the population as a whole. This is due to an asymmetry of choice. This phenomenon is widely known to marketers and producers of consumer goods, and has been studied and acknowledged for some time in scientific disciplines. Nassim Taleb has also written about this in his latest book, Skin in the Game, and he refers to it as the minority rule. I will start with the basic premise from a scientific study and then move to specific examples in order to illustrate. In any given population, people can interact and share or spread opinions and ideas. We will say that some of the population holds opinion A, some of the population holds opinion B. Some of the population holds both opinion A and B. To begin, there is a final group, a very small fraction of the population that is committed to opinion A. In the study, each of the types of individuals would interact through a series of speaker-listener pairings. Those holding opinion A would effectively speak A to another holding other opinions. After the interaction, the listener may be influenced by the interaction and would now potentially carry a different opinion. The pair interactions would continue with the individuals switching between the speaker and the listener, and over time, either change occurs or the population would remain stable with different groups holding different opinions. The interesting aspect of this study shows that once a committed group enters, where they are not susceptible to having their opinion altered, it becomes a matter of time before the entire population holds that opinion. Most interesting is that when the population of the committed group reaches only 10%, the change to the entire population is incredibly fast. A small minority with a low tolerance for being open to change can have a rapid and sweeping impact on the entire population. Naturally, studies of this type can show theoretical examples of how ideas and opinions can be shared and altered over time. They assist in providing some explanatory power when populations are looked at. Nassim Taleb, in his book Skin in the Game, has a chapter dedicated to this phenomenon and provides some insight into how it works, some barriers for the spread of the minority rule, and some examples of the principle in action. A simple example of an asymmetry of choice can be with a family of 4 and choice of a car. Assume the family has one vehicle. It gets into an accident and a new one needs to be purchased. If in the family 3 members can drive a standard or automatic, but one can only drive automatic, then it is more likely than not that the family will purchase an automatic. They will cede to the will of the minority, as the others have a choice that one does not. Now, if the cost of the automatic far exceeds that of a standard car, or the person wishes to learn how to drive a standard, this impacts the cost of that decision. The minority rule applies where the cost is low. If the cost is too high, the majority will not change. Another example is with kosher drinks. Today, less than 2% of the population in the United States is Jewish, and about 80 to 85% of them do not strictly adhere to a kosher diet. The strict adherence to kosher dietary needs are very small. Most drinks sold throughout the United States, however, are kosher. In fact, as of 2014, 41% of all food and all beverages sold throughout the United States was kosher. This vast overrepresentation of kosher products is a result of a difference in tolerance. People who do not have to eat kosher can eat kosher and non-kosher. People who must eat kosher cannot eat non-kosher. Since it doesn't cost much to prepare drinks as kosher, and there is a cost savings to having a single line of distribution, less shelf space for subcategories of products, and fewer advertising distinctions, those that are tolerant end up covering the cost for the needs of the very few. This example also applies to products that one might not expect to be kosher, like kosher relish for pork. Think about that one for a minute. Unknown to me, there are also kosher plastics and many other products. Part of the manufacturing process in plastics include the use of butyl stearate oil. Since this may be tallow-based, this poses a problem for the least tolerant. There are rabbis who have worked to ensure that every steel company in the United States that produces steel for use in food packaging now uses a vegetable-based BSO. The fact that steel companies adopt these practices surely isn't for fear of losing 20% of 2% of the population's business. It's an example of the tiny minority impacting the vast majority because the cost is so small, and the vast majority simply doesn't care. Now, I personally don't have an issue with this, and am in no way advocating anti-Semitism or calling on this overrepresentation of kosher products to stop. I'm simply using it as a way to demonstrate that in order to impact the majority, it is not a question of numbers. It is only a question of tolerance and openness. The more open and tolerant a society, the more quickly the market or even ideas can impact the population as a whole. Think about organic foods. You don't need a majority before it becomes widely available. A small percentage of the population who refuses to eat foods containing GMOs or where pesticides were used or antibiotics were given means that the majority who will eat regular or organic will find the number of organic options overrepresented. Using the first study I made mention of, a follow-up study was conducted using more than one group with a committed belief or opinion. The results showed that a population in a state of dominant belief will remain stable over long periods of time, provided that individuals within the system with committed opinions remain the same. If the minority within the population has more of those committed to their opinions, the majority will shift to that view within a short amount of time. The same holds true for Islamic or halal meat across the globe. In the UK, for instance, Lewis Pies, a manufacturer of beef and onion pies for more than 80 years, is now producing and selling halal products as 1/3 of its business, and this is expected to grow to 50% in the next few years. The halal market is expected to go completely into the mainstream, as most halal meat is not labeled as such, and those who need to eat halal inform themselves of where to find it, while the vast majority simply doesn't care. When it comes to the authoritarian ideals that come from the radical left, most people simply go through life working and getting by the best they can. The vast majority certainly don't hold a committed viewpoint to opposing authoritarian systems, and don't even take the time to explore the nature behind authoritarian systems as they are put in place. The fact is that the vast majority make up the tolerant people who don't have committed views one way or another. They hear people claiming that they are arguing for equality for those that are oppressed, and they say to themselves, that sounds good, and go along with implementation practices and policies that impact government and law. The small and intolerant minority who wish to implement these authoritarian systems need only be intolerant. They don't need to hold a majority, and they don't need to be correct. They only need to remain intolerant and require that the vast majority does not see the cost of their actions. For me, Jordan Peterson, Christina Hoff Sommers, Karen Strawn, Brent Weinstein, and others are not out proselytizing about how the rest of the world needs to change to their will. Even the reason behind almost every video I upload is not to attempt to convince people to change something in their lives to accommodate others. It is simply to point out the cost. There are costs associated with the radicals on the far left implementing programs, policies, and laws, and the vast majority are open and tolerant. They don't care about the costs, they don't see the costs, and they don't know about the costs. There is no small group of voices on the far left that is out there openly discussing the costs associated with their radical views. This is why Michael Dyson, the YouTuber Dusty, and Nathan J. Robinson claim that they are non-existent or in such small numbers as to be irrelevant. My next video will provide a clear example of just how prevalent the authoritarian viewpoint is throughout the West. I believe this should be obvious to anyone who looks at it objectively. Understanding that intolerance within social justice warrior groups can rapidly impact the vast majority of us who are truly tolerant is literally the first step in identifying the costs. Denying that small intolerant minorities can impact an entire population is either an attempt to intentionally mislead people or shows that they are ignorant of how complex systems work. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a comment and hit that like button. If you didn't like it, please explain why. Open discussion is the only way to have a better understanding of differing views. Sharing this video on social media can help keep conversations alive. Now, here are a few other videos that you may be interested in.